Hello, everybody, it's me, and we're back. I apologize for the slightly prolonged absence. I was feeling a bit drained, and I also started writing again and working on that long-term effort. But I started actually working on that again, so that's kind of put some delays on stuff. But I'm here recording this now. So an overdue episode of what we're now calling the Quick Carbon podcast instead of Quick Fire. For anyone who's not familiar, yes, it is a podcast, so it's going to be mostly still images for the entire time. So for the sake of your own eyes, you might want to just have it open and listen in another tab while you do something. Mute the ads when they come up, but please do let them play. If you'd like to support me in the podcast yourself, then you can either send stuff directly through PayPal, or you can do a monthly thing on the Patreon. All kinds of links and everything are in the description below. But now to get started with all of this. So, as expected, after waiting another week, U.S. oil consumption finally did actually drop in response to all the shutdown measures, voluntary or otherwise. U.S. oil consumption has now dropped roughly 15% or more, down under 20 million barrels per day, down to 17.8 million barrels per day of oil consumption, roughly. And among those numbers, the one we titled this video after, U.S. gasoline consumption took an enormous drop and fell to the lowest levels in nearly 30 years, since the early 90s, back when the U.S. population was 60 million people lower than it is today. They fell from the present-day averages of between 9 and 10 million barrels per day down to only a bit under 6.7 million barrels per day of gasoline consumption. Jet fuel consumption continued dropping, coming in a bit over 1.3 million barrels per day instead of the usual just under 2 million barrels per day. Diesel fuel consumption, as expected, is remaining basically the same as deliveries to stores and everything are not only still going on, but they're actually ramping up because everybody's being retarded and buying out the entire shelves because they've mistaken the virus for a hurricane or an EMP attack or something, I guess. Or maybe they just think if they hoard the correct amount of toilet paper that will somehow grant them immunity to the virus, who knows. But diesel fuel consumption in the U.S. remains at 3.9 million barrels per day. Global jet fuel consumption continued falling and has gone below half of what is normal. Global jet fuel consumption for the past week was only 2.2 million barrels per day. Whereas normally, right now at this particular time of the year, it would be around 6. Oil prices dropped slightly further this week, or rather this past week and a half, even going down as low as $19 per barrel at one point. They have since, however, come back up to, as of me recording this, $21 per barrel. Some other particular product numbers. Now, these are only from the end of January or the start of February, but ethyl-related compounds coming out of petrochemical facilities in the U.S. has begun ticking up pretty quickly. As, the pandemic was becoming evident at that point, hand sanitizer purchases and usage began to go through the roof globally. And the U.S. is actually where a lot of hand sanitizer is made, and hand sanitizer for the most part is usually ethanol. So the broad ethyl spectrum umbrella, which includes ethylene, ethanol, ethane, and the like coming out of petrochemical feedstocks in the U.S., which normally averages between 1.5 and 1.6 million barrels per day equivalent, most of that being ethylene for plastic production. However, some of it being ethanol for hand sanitizer. As of the end of January, it began jumping up. Not by a whole lot, but it jumped up to 1.73 million barrels per day as production of hand sanitizer began going into overdrive. Now, U.S., in parentheses, other petrochemical production levels have not jumped yet. They likely will soon with the next month or two of data, as that is where the components, as that is where the petrochemical components of soap will fall under, because it was primarily hand sanitizer that shot through the roof at first, but now people are emptying the soap aisles as well. So for the moment, U.S. petrochemical production was only at 335,000 barrels per day equivalent, but I do expect that to go up. And U.S. electricity demand has actually taken a massive drop in its average, with, restaurants, non-essential businesses, all kinds of stuff, tons of places not being open, not having their power on. Obviously, that has put a huge drop in U.S. electricity demand, which the EIA has a website that tracks it by the hour. It does hourly updates. And the present active by the hour consumption of electricity in the U.S. is usually between 440 and 500,000 megawatts, aka 440 to 500 gigawatts, present at any active moment, with the 500 being the usual peak in late afternoon, and the 440 usually being the lowest level of consumption around 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. However, now it has dropped to the peak level of consumption during the day, only being between 410 and 440, and the trough, or the lowest level of consumption, around 4 a.m. or 5 a.m., being all the way down between 330 and 360. So, oh yes, all of this, all of these goings on in the world have produced quite visible effects. Now, one other newsbreaker we have to add on here is the rig count drop. It is now plummeting like a tungsten weight. It has dropped all the way down now to 728 active drilling rigs. Far, far below the nearly 1,100 a year and a half ago that were active. Texas has plunged all the way down to 368. Far, far down from the 620s and plus they were once at. Oklahoma has now fallen from the 120s that it was at a year ago, all the way down to only 39. North Dakota had been holding in the 50s for years as the Bakken kept clinging to life. However, it has now been slipping, and Bakken wells are now down to only 48. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Again, sorry for the break. I resumed writing, so I've been spending a lot of time on that. Also putting together those photography montage or showcase videos that nobody watches. But they have a lot of meaning to me, so I spent a lot of time putting them together. But again, that's it. Thank you everybody who's still here after all this time. If you want to support me, PayPal, Patreon's in the description below. But like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't. Subscribe to my travel channel too. That one's been kind of paralyzed at around 800 subs for the last month. Thank you everybody. May God bless all of your lives, and I will see you all around next time. A million trumpets shine.